Good evening, all of you comrades, hive mice, and other unfortunate enough to have turned in while scanning the Vox waves. We are still seeing reports of scum gators attacks in the lower sublevels, and with these leathery skin.
You can't even finish it. You want me to do it? You want me to do it? It's my fault. Like I was trying to hold it together, fellas. I'm sorry. You want me to read it?
Do you guys want me to do the whole thing?
I want you to keep it. That's our friendly neighbor Catachan for y'all. He's gone now.
Yeah. So where was he here in the minutes for the day?
He stole your notes.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So yeah, we're, as our friend pointed out, we're still seeing reports of some scum gators. Oh wow, yeah, we are still seeing reports of those some scum gators attack in all of the lower sublevels.
Watch your toes.
Yeah, and with these leathery skinned murderous reptiles on the loose, the death leopards and the four-armed rats have stepped up patrols at the edge of the sump. Even your champions, the pirate Vox waves, are out here with some of our tactically borrowed heavy hardware holding the line. We are your light in the gloomy twilight of the Underhive, a beacon to those lost in the void of the cafeterium lines, the salvation to the insanity of static 665.66 UHMR Chemrat Radio.
Yeah, out here. You might say we are the Radionomicon.
We are the Radionomicon. As always, I am your one and only Goblin King, and I am joined tonight by my maniacal maniac of mechanisms, Marky.
Moo? How do I say?
You got to keep going with it. Come on.
Meow.
Meow. Do I look like a cat?
See me drinking from a saucer.
Kind of sounds like a puma.
And
making up animals.
And back from his assignment undercover in the Upper Hive's Garden District, we have our numero uno killer capsaicin cultivator, Kevin.
Have you seen the flowers up in them gardens? Let me tell you.
Did you take pictures?
With what camera do you think they were going to let me in with that security, man? What happens in the garden stays in the garden.
Don't you have that remembrancer thing still, or did you lose it?
He's got that prison wallet, though.
Got that prison. That's true. You do have that prison wallet.
Yeah, that one's always available.
Well, yeah, but that was, you know.
And if
There's not a camera in there.
There's no camera in there.
And if you hear those heavy bolter rounds and flamer sounds in the background, that's Beast. He's just out of earshot, mostly because it's hard to hear anything over his homemade heavy flamer autocannon combo turret.
That's a hell of a weapon, man.
Yeah, man.
It is one hell of a weapon.
But you know what? He's taking down them gators left and right.
I wouldn't want to carry it, though.
No.
It's real heavy.
There's a reason we make him carry his shit.
Yeah. Everybody carry their own shit.
And all of our Vox equipment.
I mean, yeah.
And pretty much anything else we need him to carry.
Yeah. You gotta feed him, too, so he carries the food.
Well, that's why we're killing the gators.
Yeah.
More on that later.
Sump gator stew.
So, guys, if you are joining us today, this is part 2 of possibly a 3-part episode, but we're not going to hold our breath on the Aeldari and the Aeldari's past and how to play them, how the faction works in Warhammer 40k. However, since this is mandatory podcast fuck around time and there's always a little bit of bookkeeping to do, we need to start off by talking a little bit about Slaanesh, because we are going to talk a bit about Slaanesh a little bit later on. Slaanesh is an interesting place. It's very difficult to figure out where to start. I'll just keep going.
I was like, at the fucking, that's what they called it, right?
At the fucking.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty much what it was.
Yeah,
it's accurate word.
So Slaanesh is one of the 4 chaos gods. Slaanesh has had many names, including She Who Thirsts, the Dark Prince, Lord of Excess, and there are a lot more. They are the youngest chaos god, and we will be talking about he/she/them a bit today as we move forward with the Aeldari.
He, she.
He got a nice pair of tits.
Yep. Slaanesh is the chaos god of pleasure, excess, and decadence. However, they also encompass lust, pride, self-indulgence, the pursuit of vanity, and perfection as some of the gifts and things that draw her attention.
You had me in the first half, man.
In the first, I had you in the first half. Did I lose you in the second half?
Yeah, once you started talking about vanity, I was like,
Yeah, whatever.
I was like, sex? Yeah, I'm down for that. Vanity? I
mean, when that's what looks back at you in the mirror, I can see.
Exactly.
I can see why.
Whoa.
Well, that's because
You probably
I also like eating in excess.
Hey, you're so vain. You probably think this podcast is about you.
It's about me.
Really, guys? Did I just pull out something that's...
Is this
Did
like
I just generationally jump over? No, it's a famous song. Anyway, Slaanesh normally appears as half man, half woman, split down the center, both of which have very androgynous features. Twin sets of devilish horns grow out of its head. Slaanesh can appear, however, in any physical form, but often prefers male bodies when dealing with humans and female bodies when dealing with the Aeldari. Slaanesh's sacred number is 6, and her colors are purple, pink, and black. We kind of wanted to go over all of this because there is a tendency to change the pronoun you use when you're referring to them quite often. And depending on your introduction to Slaanesh and lore, you can favor one impression over another. As an example, I use her, they most often because my introduction is from the Aeldari.
Right.
And the Aeldari see Slaanesh as a she first and as a them second.
Yeah, I mean, Slaanesh looks pretty feminine, so I usually refer to it as they, she, them.
And then I'm kind of on the opposite. I mean, I do use they, the, it a lot with Slaanesh, but because I come from, well, the human-centric point of view, which views it as the prince.
Yep, the Dark Prince.
Pleasure. So referred to as prince then implies a male.
Yeah.
Instead of princess.
Yeah.
And then also the Age of Sigmar counterpart is also a he.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think it depends too.
Does that one change?
I think it changes too, but I'm not. As I'm beginning to learn, because I have a lot of I still have a lot of weird shared. There was a time period. A lot of this has been retconned, and a lot of this has been retconned as far as the IRL version of history too. There was definitely a very hazy period between, I want to say, 3rd and 5th edition, where the Warhammer Fantasy world and the Warhammer 40k world were still very entwined. However, dude, if you go back and try to look that stuff up, GW is like, no. We changed that in Rogue Trader. We got rid of that a lot. We got rid of that in the 80s. That was, we only mentioned it once. We don't know what you're talking about, but there very much remember it sticking around for several editions. I remember
when I started in 4th, 5th, that was a thing.
It was still being
that the demons were like, the demons they're the same fucking demons.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just double checked. So I was pretty much dead on with this. So in it's mainly from Total Warhammer, but it's based off the obvious.
So it is a he in
It's fantasy. Prince Sigvald the Magnificent.
I thought that was just an avatar of Slaanesh. I didn't realize that was Slaanesh.
He might just be the champion of Slaanesh, kind of I guess
I thought he was Fulgrim
Karn or something.
Yeah, he's essentially the Fulgrim counterpart, I guess.
Yeah.
But that's who represents in the material world and is a he.
The other thing I kind of look at it as is Tzeentch is a bird, Nurgle's a zombie, Khorne's a dude. Why not have Slaanesh be a chick?
Yeah,
definitely.
But it is very specifically done even in lore in universe. Right. Slaanesh appears differently depending on who they're interacting with.
Well, I just like it how I like Slaanesh is definitely one of my favorites right next to Khorne. They are right up there both for me. The reason I like Slaanesh is because it gets deep. As far as Slaanesh is my favorite part about Slaanesh is that they're described in excess in its most advanced
every
form.
way.
So being both the genders or plus that is in excess. So it's awesome that you can it looks at it in that way.
What's more sexy than sex? Both sex.
Yes. And sex.
All
sex.
All
and
sex.
Eating.
All sex.
Not both sex. All sex.
All sex.
When Slaanesh sat down and was being asked all of the standard questions when they were filling out their paperwork.
All of the
above.
They're like, sex? And yes.
They're Caucasian. Okay, Hispanic.
Yeah, that too.
And And everything else, yes.
Yeah, and they
Check all the
they just looked at, and they're like, you checked all the boxes, and Slaanesh is like, yes, I would like to have sex with all of. That's what this is about, right?
Yeah, it's a checklist.
Yeah. So the thing that I like to point out, and you brought it up, it's very easy. There's a lot of we talk about it a lot on the podcast. There's a lot of things in Warhammer that you can memeify real fast, and Slaanesh gets memeified into like sex jokes,
right?
And I do it. I share Slaanesh memes all the time. My favorite is the demonette nurse pulling on the rubber glove.
Oh, yeah,
it's like, are you ready for your checkup, heretic? I really like that one. I think that's funny. But like at the end of the day, Slaanesh exists, and we'll get into how Slaanesh was born, but Slaanesh exists out of the Eldar psyche and all things excessive. And we have a tendency to surface level all things excessive into like sex,
violence, and gluttony, essentially.
Right. But like
more than that.
Look at all of the 7 deadly sins. Every single one of the deadly sins. Like if you look at the movie 7 that deals with the 7 deadly sins, there's a reason that the killer is going to excessive extremes with each one to make a point. And like very realistically, look at that character from 7 that Kevin Spacey plays. If you guys haven't seen the movie, I'd recommend watching it. I know that Kevin Spacey is not a very good person with what we know about him now, but 7 is a very well done movie and he's the bad guy. Look at how he executes all of those people with the 7 deadly sins. Each one of those is taken to excess. Each one of those is something that Slaanesh would like revel in. That is what Slaanesh wants.
Right. The whole idea around Slaanesh is that.
Yeah.
Excess and one of fiction and all kinds of nonsense.
One of the things that happened with Fulgrim as Fulgrim lost it and became closer and closer to demonhood was he was trying to paint the perfect picture. And he got to the point where he was painting in blood and excrement because that was the only medium he could find to impart life force into his art. So again, like surface level, sexy jokes. Actual horror of what's happening, Fulgrim was ripping people apart and using their internal fluids to paint.
He was painting in poo-poo.
Yeah. The other good example to look at is the Swordmaster of Slaanesh, Lucius. Gotta have these examples bitter.
Mostly, I don't know too much about all the traitor legions because I never really deep dived the Horus Heresy. Really, I kind of skipped that and.
You're gonna learn.
Oh, I'm eventually gonna read all the books. It'll eventually happen.
We are specifically probably before the end of the calendar year 2021 doing the Unification Wars, buddy.
You know what you need to do? You need to make Michelle read the Horus.
Oh yeah, we do, and then tell us,
and then she can come in here every like month or week, however long.
That's
it takes
right.
To read
That's
a book.
right.
And then she could tell us about it.
We could do that.
I mean, I could also read the books myself.
If you guys don't know,
she has a reading podcast.
One of our amazing community members, Lady of Flowers, has a pretty cool podcast called Lunch Break, where they read fantasy novels.
Book club,
yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's cool.
So Lucius the Eternal is who I was thinking of. So Lucius doesn't have a face anymore. He became so obsessed with his mastery of swordsmanship. That's his thing. The way that he fell to Slaanesh is perfection in swordsmanship. And he had been sliced so many times in his pursuit. He was very pretty when he was a normal emperor's children. He was known for his like handsome features, but he had gotten injured and slashed so many times in the pursuit of mastery and several times in the face that he started to scarify himself specifically. And if you've seen the picture of the traitor marine, the Emperor's Children's traitor marine with like the big black eyes and just the like, there is no face. It's just like pink skin. And then he's holding a sword. That's Lucius, the Eternal. Yeah. He's creepy looking. So like
that's supposed to be more of the Sigvald kind of analysis.
Maybe look up Lucius really quick.
Let's see what
he's creepy as fuck looking.
Like. Does he have a name besides Lucius?
Lucius the Eternal.
There we go.
He was friends with Loken.
Oh, he's a looker.
Look at his crusade picture. Then look at his
arm, white hair
that's made of like intestines.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, he looks like Spawn.
That's nasty.
Yep.
He looks like Spawn, and the Joker had a hate fuck baby.
Oh yeah, look at this one.
That's a creepy model.
So he started getting cut and scarred on the face during the heresy, and then he just fucking embraced it.
Yeah, Pride and Fall, I think, is the cover of the book. That is, it almost looks like think like Venom, but normal eyes and normal flesh tone.
The picture of him in, I want to say the seventh edition Codex is just fucking amazing. I'll post it. I'll find the picture and post it up.
Just know he's an ugly motherfucker in excess.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like,
which is a good coin flip from him being what was considered a handsome space marine to now being a pretty fucking terrible looking space marine.
Because the thing that he took to excess was how skillful he was and prideful he was of his swordsmanship, and that's the important part. Slaanesh, like you had mentioned, is pushing you to some extreme. So if your extreme is making barbecue sauce,
then you will cook much barbecue sauce.
And you may not maybe you look like a follower of Nurgle because you consume so much barbecue sauce where it's like constantly leaking out of your pores and like your intestines hang out of your mouth. But you're perfecting this thing for Slaanesh, so you're still here.
Speaking of,
that is definitely a Slaanesh thing.
And bust a nut and booty sweat.
Mm-hmm. Butt, sweat, and tears.
Butt, sweat, and tears. There you go. So, to get on to our main topic for today. Today, we are diving into part 2 of our exploration of the Aeldari race and the several factions you can use as a base to build your own army or your own lore. If you're joining us for the first time this week, we recommend going back and listening to part 1, but we did go ahead and toss together a condensed version. So the Aeldari are space elves, most likely descended from non-primate humanoid ancestors. All Aeldari are highly psychic and even use psychic mastery to build their own technology. They were most likely created by the Old Ones, which are super ancient alien frog lizard people, as weapons to fight against the Necron Tyr and the Satan. The Necron and Eldar are incredibly old enemies. The Eldar inherited the Old Ones' empire and are more importantly, the Webway when the Old Ones either fled from the galaxy, were killed by the Satan, or were killed by the Satan and Necron. The Eldar inherited the Old Ones' empire and, more importantly, the Webway when the Old Ones either A, fled the galaxy, or B, were killed off by the Satan and the Necron. The Necron went into hibernation soon after the Old Ones vanished, leaving the galaxy to the Eldar. The Eldar posed a large enough threat that the Necron didn't so much as give in as they tactically retreated into stasis to wait out the Enslaver Plague, hoping the Enslavers would take out the Eldar and the other younger races that threatened the Necron supremacy. All of this, this is probably the most important part. Everything we just summed up and almost all of part 1 took place millions of years before primates on Terra evolved into humanity.
So in 40k lore, we evolved from primates.
Yes.
From apes.
That's why the Eldar call us the Monkai.
Now,
because they had probably interacted with apes.
When was
times, and then they were like, I've seen this before. It's just a little bit smarter this time.
A little less hair on them.
Yep.
When was the Emperor brought to fruition?
So we will get into, we're going to do an episode on ancient Terran history
Biggie.
And then the Unification Wars as a primer to our Horus Heresy series. But to lay out the question you're asking, there were 12 mystics at an unspoken amount of time in humanity's history. It's generally considered to be sometime either before or about 1,000 years before or about 1,000 years after the birth of the human historical ancient figure of Jesus.
So
there were these 12 monks that were perpetuals. They would die and they would be reborn. They all sacrificed.
Supposed to be like prophets, quote unquote.
Yes, they all sacrificed them.
Where's the Cabal? No, the Cabal is the ones trying to resurrect the Emperor by killing him or whatever.
Kind of. The Cabal's real weird. Yeah, we should do weird conspiracy theories of the Empire at some point.
40k conspiracy theories. That'd be a good.
That's our new segment.
Yeah, that'd be a good segment.
But so these 12 prophets, these
How many
12
toes
monks,
does the emperor really have?
at least one. It's more
One big
lots.
One. He just has one big
Lots.
toe.
No, it's lots. And I know it's lots
It's at
because they
least lots.
sent an orc to count them.
Conspiracy theory number one.
So these 12 mystics, prophets, monks, however you want to refer to them, and I believe the number is 12. We will clarify this for you guys in greater detail. We're just sort of loosely laying it out. They got together and basically made like a suicide pact where they were all going to die at the same time so they could funnel their energy into the reincarnation of one being. That one being was the Emperor.
And if I remember right, it's because they foresaw like the galaxy turning into a shit show, right?
They foresaw humanity turning into a shit. I think is closer to what it was.
Okay.
And
eventually they realized that humanity needed a one type of leader.
They realized that there was a reason for this one figure.
So real life, IRL.
Right.
How long ago did Jesus die?
From us?
Yeah.
2021 years. 2021
So
years
2021 is the amount of time.
No.
Was it
Essentially.
No. He died.
AD or some shit?
He would have died 1990 years ago because he would have been about 30. He would have been between 25 and 35 when he was crucified.
Mm-hmm.
And that would have been year 25 or year 35, I think.
Is that how that works?
I thought it was
Something
after
similar?
they had crucified him.
No, it's not after death.
I know it's not after death, but I thought it still lined up with the death timeline. But I know that it's not. That's not what it means.
Yeah, it's Amon Odamus.
Roughly.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of where I'm like, okay,
roughly 2,000 years ago, Jesus was crucified on the cross.
So
in the
you're saying
40K timeline, it is possible, the way that it's presented, that the Emperor watched Jesus be crucified.
Gotcha. Okay, so the Emperor would have
as the Emperor or as one of the 12 prophets?
We don't know.
Okay.
The way that the Emperor is talked about in like pre-M30 history, pre-Unification Wars history, is that he has been around and manipulating all of human history. And they specifically say things like all of human history. Yeah. So you could make an argument probably that the Emperor was Herodotus, that the Emperor was Pilate. Yeah. Just pick somebody and
Napoleon. Any number of historical figures.
And he kept manipulating things and then either dying and being reborn or fading into the background to watch.
So that was kind of my point. Where, like, if we were the 40K universe, where would we fall in line? Like the Emperor, like as far as would he be alive yet? If he was alive, is he like Keanu Reeves, where it's like, oh, I've been alive since the 10.
I'm very much recalling on knowledge that isn't super prescient in my mind right now.
And I'm sure a lot of this is like
that's what I'm saying. Loosely
20 years ago, and then has been retconned because
a lot of this is being redone.
It's being redone now. Yeah, exactly.
But essentially, the Emperor came into being sometime between like the rise of the Assyrian Empire, so the empire that existed before the Egyptians, to the rise of the Holy Roman Empire.
Gotcha.
So about 1,000 years after the death of Jesus.
Assyrians being the same as like Gilgamesh and the tribes of the Euphrates.
Yeah, we're literally talking about like some of the most ancient empires. If you wanted to put like down some sort of like parallel or roots, somebody might say an imperial historian who had access to our records reliably might be like, oh, Alexander the Great, obviously the emperor. Genghis Khan, obviously the emperor.
Yeah.
Hitler, obviously the emperor.
Huge historical figures in
basically anybody
that massively changed how the world worked. And I realized that I threw Hitler into that list, and that might make a couple of people angry. That the idea behind the emperor is that one, he is a genocidal motherfucking maniac. He is not a good person.
He understands that there are like that culling if in his mental math would have benefited humanity in some way, he has no problem writing off those 10 million.
And legitimately, look at look at like Crusade era imperial history. The emperor would just be like, yeah, these fucking 10 planets, I don't give a fuck, wipe them clean.
Yeah.
The emperor is not a good person.
Yeah.
Genghis Khan was not a good person. I don't know that emperor isn't a dude that's necessary. The emperor is a megalomaniacal maniac who thinks he's necessary.
Okay, this is coming from the Eldar. I mean, I don't accept that, Ryan.
I don't know.
Well, no, that's the way that
sounds like heresy to me.
Eldar, man, I don't accept that.
That's the way that he's presented as a outside of the lore perspective.
You knife-eared son of a bitch, you take that back.
that the emperor has made. I very specifically want everybody who's listening to the podcast to understand we are not saying that Genghis Khan and Hitler or Alexander the Great were good people. They are people who massively impacted history.
Right. And it could also be argued that even like
you could also say
the emperor was Hitler, but only to spur the rest of the allied nations to tech up because he saw the state of
to deal with them.
Right. Or creating an enemy like Hitler, you would then buff the rest of humanity to combat that.
Or the emperor manipulated politics in Germany to make sure somebody like Hitler rose, specifically because the emperor, who was Eisenhower, needed to run the war for America or whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's any number of characters
somebody
like that
who made a massive impact on history, and that could have been the emperor.
Exactly.
Anyway,
this will lead into our fourth spin-off 40k conspiracy theories.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
His big E Rasputin.
His big E Rasputin. I mean, fucking Rasputin, another like horrible character in history.
Rasputin.
That's all I think. It's like a fucking Boney
fucking song. Oh, I love it,
dude. Rasputin was that shit scared me.
He is a name. He is a bad
story of how many times they tried to kill him in like one day, essentially.
And oddly enough, Rasputin, also not a very nice person to the Jewish community.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Back on the 90s.
Yeah. So to answer your question, it's very probable that the emperor was involved in human history as early as M1.
Gotcha.
Which would have been the first 1,000 years after the death of Jesus. It's very possible that he was involved beforehand.
Now, where does that fall in the 40k timeline?
What do you mean?
Like, where does M1 follow?
So we are currently in M2 because it is 2021.
Gotcha. Okay.
Each M is 1,000 years after the death of the ancient human religious figure, Jesus Christ.
Now,
and 40K is very specific to say that Big E and Jesus Christ are different figures.
Right. Now where does
Buddha may have been Big E, though.
Now where
he's like, peace, my brothers, and let's eat.
Now, where does the fucking happen, and how far back did it happen before M1?
So the decline of Eldar society, which is most of what we're going to talk about in this episode, starts taking place probably around the time that humans are becoming Homo sapiens.
Okay.
However,
so
the actual snap, the actual event has a very specific moment in time, and I would like to reveal that when it comes up.
I was about to say, I think I remember what lines up exactly with it.
It's very important to human imperial history.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's why I didn't want to speculate, because I'm pretty sure it's what I think it is, and that is a pivotal moment.
So we're actually going to talk about how the decline of Eldar society affected the galaxy as a whole and how that impacted the humans. Very good question. Very valid question. Last episode, we focused on laying a lot of the groundwork for the Aeldari race before...
That's a nice way of Ryan saying, okay, now shut the fuck up. I need to move on to Eldar lore.
Last episode, we focused on laying out the groundwork for the Aeldari race before we looked into some of the events in Aeldari history. Specifically, we looked very deeply into the War in Heaven, which was the event that kind of was the precursor to the rise of the Aeldari Empire. In this episode, we will spend most of our time talking about the Aeldari's descent into darkness, the fracturing of the Aeldari people, the birth of Slaanesh, and how the Aeldari exist in the modern timeline of Warhammer 40k. To start us off here, we're going to do Descent into Darkness and the Fracturing of a People. As the Aeldari settled into their dominance of the galaxy, they grew decadent and lazy. Their advances in technology had long ago replaced their needs to engage in physical labor or manual agriculture. As we mentioned last time, one of the reasons that the Exodites dipped, or one of the ways that the Exodites dipped and maintained not falling into this stuff, was by embracing physical labor and manual agriculture. That's going to be important. Having outgrown the need for physical labor, their curiosities only grew. Aeldari society provided for their every need and necessity, removing all needs of what we would consider individual effort. As the centuries stretched on, the Aeldari continued to fuel their innate passions to indulge in ever more extreme levels of esoteric knowledge and physical or sensual excess.
Yeah, buddy.
Ever seeking new ways to heighten emotional and physical sensations. This decadent behavior proved to be corrosive to the soul. The longer they, as a race, focused on these pursuits, the more it wore on their very core. Cults grew, dedicated to those extremes and excesses. From physical pleasures to those seeking ancient and forbidden knowledges and others. Slowly, these cults gained tighter control over every facet of Aeldari society. Driving a divide ever deeper across the empire, these cults sought ever-increasing passions, embracing every unnatural impulse in the pursuits of ever greater debauchery.
What's debauchery? Tell me, Kevin.
Do you actually need to know what debauchery is?
Yes.
I've never actually looked up the word, but to my best understanding, debauchery is kind of like
shenanigans.
It's getting into port and immediately. Trouble. Yeah, it's getting into port and immediately blowing your entire month's salary
in the whorehouse.
Booze and whores.
Basically,
shenanigans.
What Marines do when they get back.
Pirates.
Straight to debauchery.
Pirates engage in debaucherous activity.
Shenanigans.
It's pleasure in excess.
I'm going to pistol whip the next motherfucker who says shenanigans.
And what's that place you like?
I think it's called... Oh, that one came out quiet.
Shit his pants. It came out quiet because something blocked it on the way.
Oh, snap. So the wisest seers started to see these cracks forming in Aeldari society and warned that this path led toward ever deepening evils and ever excruciating levels of suffering. The first to see this foulness of corruption creeping into Eldar's
this fallacy of corruption?
Yeah, the fallacy and corruption. The first to see the foulness of this corruption creeping into Aeldari society became known as the Exodites. The Exodites turned away from the degeneration of society several millennia before the fall of the Eldar. So we had talked about that last episode. I
saw it in their butter churners.
Well, when did all this stuff start happening? So we talk about it a little bit later in the episode, but it's important at this point to realize that even though as a whole, Eldar society was going down this path, there were still Eldar that lived in Eldar society that were like, oh, it is fucked up. And we're trying to
stop it
from happening.
Participating in it.
Yeah. So they saw Slaanesh in their toast and were like, "This, we can't let this happen."
The seers didn't necessarily know that Slaanesh was coming, but they knew that something was coming.
Something bad.
And they knew that it was bad. Also, at this point, the other Chaos Gods were starting to emerge or had already emerged. The other Chaos Gods kind of all emerged during or right after the War in Heaven. And that's one of the things that always weirds me out, because there's this whole like, oh, well, Khorne was born during the medieval ages of the humans. And I'm like, that doesn't necessarily make any sense, because it would have been...
maybe Khorne made his appearance to humans.
Right. That's when he started.
Rather than Khorne didn't exist before then, it was Khorne didn't exist to us.
Yeah, when I mean Krork were stomping on, Krons and whatnot.
Right.
Who do you think was
beating their meat?
It's also it's also important. It's also
Oh,
important to note.
mama.
It's also important to note that at this point in the timeline, the Immaterium is still relatively peaceful. There are islands of crazy in the Immaterium, but the majority of the Immaterium is still safe. So when you die, when your soul passed on as an Eldar, you were still able to like rest a little bit and then reincarnate.
You weren't getting your booty eaten out by.
It wasn't a realm of extreme negative energy that
it hadn't quite happened yet. It happens at the end of this story.
Yeah.
Eldar are the good guys, huh?
I never said
it's your fault, Ryan.
I never said we were the good guys.
Your fault.
My introduction to the game was through the Eldar. So the Eldar will always be my like in air quotes good guys, just like a lot of people whose introduction was Space Marines as the good guys. In reality, neither of those factions are good.
At all. On the way here, I was actually listening to an interesting perspective on that. And it's, while yes, they're not overtly the good guys who stick to the main tenets of what a good guy technically is, but there are definitely bad guys.
Oh yeah. Well,
and then there are the people who are anti-bad guy, which by kind of default would make them the good guys.
The better guys.
Well, I mean,
right.
The less bad guys.
Right, which are technically still heroes.
And one of the reasons that I lean on the fact that the Eldar are kind of the good guys, and this will come up later, is the Eldar very much understand that the path to hell is paved in good intentions.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's what happened to them. And they are watching the humans do it right now. And they are trying to stop the humans from doing what they did again.
Well, like in key moments and whatnot, that's why they have like Farseers are like, oh, this guy needs to be saved. Intentions between the Eldar and the humans are at the level they are in 40k because we're trying to sell plastic models and you have to fight each other. But lore-wise, that was my little joke, but lore-wise is because the Eldar have gotten to the point where every time they tried to deal with humans in a more like mentorship role, the humans literally started a war with them. Right. It ended in Monkai shenanigans.
And they're like, yeah.
To be fair, and they're like, ends by the humans figure out they're being manipulated, and humans don't like to be manipulated by aliens.
I'm not a stupid, smelly dumbass.
I'm not as dumb of a monkey as you think I am. Blam!
Who's dumb now, motherfucker?
and literally what happens on the other side is the Eldar go, all you understand is violence? Great, we're better at it than you are. And that's really realistically
until they meet a power fist attached to a space marine, and then they find out that humans are really good at violence.
Until we drop down with psychic screams and burst your eardrums and grab a banshee sword through you.
That's different.
This very legitimately becomes the whose dick is better, bigger, who pees farther.
Better.
I pee farther.
Whose dick bends bitter.
Slaanesh.
No, I pee real far.
But anyway, so that's your perfection. That's your fault.
Dude, I have
how far you can pee.
You know, everybody's got a skill. That happens to be one of mine.
I actually know a girl who can pee farther than I can.
That's pretty impressive.
She knows how to manipulate.
Knows how to pinch it off to get a nice.
Yep, and she proved it in the bathroom of a punk show.
Impressive.
Yeah, she's like, "Oh, you motherfuckers don't believe me." And then she proved it, and then we dated.
My Slaanesh
and then we dated for like a year and a half, because that's a skill that you don't turn down. When that person goes, "And do you want a drink?" You're like, "Yes, ma'am. Don't pee on me."
Yeah, I want to.
And then the next year and a half,
bring it out of your body.
And then the next year and a half of your relationship with this person is based on fear. No, I'm kidding.
When Ryan was like, "Do you want a drink?" and I was like, "Oh, Ryan, please tell me you said no." Please tell me she didn't pee on you.
Oh my God, you motherfuckers. We were at a punk show at a bar. She showed her stupid human trick, and then she asked if I wanted a drink. I didn't even put that together. I wonder if that was the joke she was making.
Probably.
I'm going to find her on Facebook and ask her right now, actually. I'm pretty sure we're friends on Facebook.
She listened to the podcast?
No.
That's too bad.
But I did mention her earlier today, and I did change her name for sake of storytelling continuity.
Good call.
Fun.
This is the gal who worked at the Jumping Turtle.
Yeah.
So the point was the Exodites moved away from the degeneration of Aeldari society several millennia before the fall. So we talked about this last time. Like, when did the Exodites leave? Was it a couple of weeks? Was it a couple of days? It was millennia before.
Yeah, this was
and it doesn't say like 4 millennia, and it doesn't say a millennia. It says millennia before. So we don't really know, but let's assume, just for sake of storytelling purposes, that like M5, M10, the Exodites dipped.
And you could also even go as far as to say that it wasn't all at once. That in a certain several millennia before, a couple tribes of Eldar went and were like, all right, peace. And then some other guys were like, I'm going to do what they did. Then some more people dipped out. And then over time,
the Seers are trying to regain control over society. It's not working. And they're putting apart this plan.
Right. It's essentially an escape plan.
It wouldn't be people. M5. It would be before M at all, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, it would.
It could.
Yeah.
It could be. I just put a date to it,
right,
to give some context. It could be before M1.
What do we have? Because
we don't have a lot that connects ancient Eldari history to actual human timekeeping.
I was going to ask, since M1 starts at humans.
Starts at Jesus.
Starts essentially at Jesus, which is kind of like around human beginnings.
Jesus
right.
Like
Jesus times.
Like how we have BC to reference before. Do we have a...
We do not have an Eldari calendar.
Okay.
Oh.
So the major reason...
So essentially there's nothing that kept any kind of time records from before M1. Everything is just before M1 at that point.
The major reason we don't have Eldari records is because the Eldari don't look at time the same way humans do.
Right.
The next major reason that we don't have Eldari records is because Games Workshop has very specifically kind of tailored the lore to be as humans understand it, this is how other races understand it.
Right.
So everything's told from like the Imperium's perspective.
So a lot of lore is told from the Imperium's perspective.
So it's like, knife ears, beginning of time.
Yeah.
When it all happened.
In general, it is accepted that the War in Heaven happened 60 million years before the rise of humanity.
Gotcha.
And it ended... Well, it started and ended, whatever, about that much time before. But then the Eldar would have needed to deal with the enslavers. They would have needed to deal with whatever. The orcs would have needed to settle down, go into their corner. So say that all took like 30,000 years or 30 million years for everything to even out.
Gotcha.
Especially the Eldar are longer lived. So now let's say we're only 30 million years before humans rise or whatever.
Here comes M1, Monkai.
And it very well could have been that, and we're also not really given an idea of how long Eldar society existed at the peak of their civilization.
Right.
What we do know from the history that's been released is that humanity has existed at the quote unquote peak of their civilization for at least 10,000 years. So if on average an Eldar lives for 1,000 years more than a human, and humans have managed to keep their shit together for 10,000 years, multiply 10,000 by 1,000, and you get, 10 million?
Yeah.
So say that Eldar society was probably at its peak.
I just went with it.
Yeah, I believe you.
Oh, fuck. Is that?
I believe you. It's too late.
A long-ass time ago.
It's a big number. A big number. Let's just say
years, lots.
that if humanity managed to keep their shit together for 10,000 years, the Eldar probably managed to keep their shit together for 1,000 times that number.
Right.
As a small number, possibly more as a large number.
Agreed.
So you're saying that like golden age humanity was 10,000 years long?
I'm saying if we assume that the height of the Imperium started in 30,000 and still exists
you're talking like
in 40,000.
Not golden age humanity.
We're talking specifically about the chronological history we know that we as outsiders can say exists.
Right.
We can make an educated guess that Eldar society probably existed for. But anyway, it's just important to note that the Exodites dipped probably 1,000 years before it was obvious what was happening, like really obvious what was happening. They dipped thousands of years before it was obvious. Like if it's pretty obvious a week after or like a day after you got bruised that you've got the bruise, these guys were like, oh, you're going to fall off. You were like, when you get a bruise when you're 25 doing something stupid on your bike, the Exodites were like 10 years before you're born. Your kid's going to get a bruise. We don't want to be involved. We're leaving. That's kind of the way. The Exodites were like, the shit hadn't even started to hit the fan yet, and they dipped.
Jesus on toast.
They pursued a self-imposed exile far from the core worlds of the Aeldari Empire. They live what can be described as pre-industrial lives in comparison to the higher tech subfactions of the Asuryani and Drukhari. I want to specify that. They live pre-industrial lives. Immediately put in your head pre-industrial human lives? Cool. But then also realize that they are a highly advanced spacefaring civilization.
So whatever the like rewind for them.
It very much could be that they were capable or they are capable of like singing trees into existence, which to humans in modern society today in 2021 would be like, what magic fuckery is this? Mm-hmm. So we don't know what pre-industrial lives for the Aeldari mean.
I mean, essentially it's what is it? Subsistence agriculture and so, stuff like it's
so they took these steps,
became farmers.
They took these steps to remind them of the hardships of life and to focus them on their own spiritual health. They wanted to start healing the damage that living decadent lives had caused. And again, when they dipped, decadent lives may have been like, oh my God, how much does a newspaper weigh? Like that could have been the level of it.
Like every other problem in the universe had been solved, but how much does a newspaper weigh?
Or no.
And then somebody was like, that is the first step on the road to butt stuff. I'm out.
Listen, Jonathan, I haven't lifted a newspaper in 20 years. I have robots that lift my newspapers for me. And the Exodites were like, y'all, this is bad. I don't know how, but it's bad.
But it's bad.
So they, having predicted, here you go, Mark. Here's your answer. Having predicted the coming of Slaanesh, the Exodites encouraged and cultivated the growth of psychoactive crystalline stone structures in order to connect their soul stones to the world spirits on their worlds. So they, at some point, knew Slaanesh was coming and knew that soul stones and the world spirit was going to be important.
So did they?
The Exodites came up with that technology. The Craftworlds adopted it.
Oh, okay. Oh.
It wasn't the other way.
I was wondering when soul stones came around.
I learned that this week.
Cool.
I did not know that. Meanwhile, the core worlds of the Aeldari continued to slip further and further into depravity, excess, and hedonism. Seers and councils resisted the temptations of those around them, and even conclaves of Aeldari society existed in a state that would have been close to normalcy. Just to be clear, not all of the core worlds were into this crap. There were isolated pockets of people fighting against it. However, they were in the minority. No life was spared the attentions of the cults dedicated to pleasure that spanned from murderous to the perverse, and often were just a mix of the two. A creeping spiritual sorrow from the heights and innocence lost by the entire people began to pervade their entire culture. Brother fought brother. Murderers and killers stalked the streets. First, they kept to the shadows, but later they just murdered in the open, looking to fulfill their most vile lusts. As blood began to flow openly in the streets, the crowds cheered to see even greater displays of gore, lust, and avarice. Think of the fall of the Roman Empire, the fact that we often talk about gladiator pits being used to calm the crowds.
It's kind of like the fall of Rome and the purge.
Yep.
And porn all in one.
Yeah. And it's important to realize that a big part of this was just that people, the Aeldari people, liked to go to Colosseums and watch Aeldari murder Aeldari.
Because there were no... It's totally... People forget that it changes the name of the game when you can be reborn.
Yeah, exactly.
That death isn't final completely changes the game. And it's hard for us as humans where death is very final, at least to our knowledge, to like even comprehend what that would be like.
Yeah.
And what kind of like apathy that would just bring about in your society.
I just thought about it right now, but I want to say, is it Spartacus Blood and Sand? Was that the Stars show?
Honestly, I never
did all the gladiator stuff. Is it just Spartacus?
Blood and Sand was like a spin-off series from it, right?
Or was that because there were like 7 seasons.
I think there's
there's
not including the spinoffs.
I know we've watched it. My fiance really likes it, so we watched it a couple of times.
Good. The guy I think passed away from cancer in the first season.
I heard so much. He was a good actor too.
He was. I really liked him.
The guy that took over wasn't that bad.
No, he wasn't. I think they did 2 more seasons, and then I think they did like spinoffs.
But there is, I very distinctly remember now, there's a sequence in that where they're at one of the like smaller gladiator pits. They're not at like the Coliseum. They're like a smaller one. And the gladiators are fucking murdering. They're fighting to the death in the pit. And just up in the stands, there's literally some chick getting railed from behind while she watches.
Yeah, there was.
And she's getting her titty honked, you know, while this dude's balls deep in her, and they're both watching. And that's kind of the way that some of this reads. Like the Eldar in the stands were probably fucking while watching people murder each other because that was their entertainment. That was the place their society.
They really like to say cock in that show.
Oh my God, dude. They really like to cut people's cocks off in that show.
Yeah.
That was a time.
That was a time.
There was a time, because remember, that was kind of the early Game of Thrones.
Exactly.
And there was a lot of cock and cock cuttings in Game of Thrones.
Deadwood ripped that Band-Aid straight off.
Yeah.
This cock-sucking wagon wheel on this cock-sucking wagon that cock-sucking fell off of this cock-sucking fucking cock-sucking cock-sucking
it's different when it's like
rock that was on the cock-sucking road. Jesus Christ, Deadwood, how many times you had to put cock-sucking into one fucking line?
It's just funny, like watching like old-timey, like is it Greek?
Roman?
Roman?
Spartacus is Greek.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought Spartacus was also Roman.
No, because I'm pretty sure it was the Greek. Yeah, but Roman history liked to borrow from Greek history.
The other problem is that like the Romans ended up conquering Greece. Because they're Thadian. Spartacus is a Thadian. I'm pretty sure that's Greek. But he could have been.
This is a 40k podcast, Kevin. How dare you?
Ultramar.
I was just right.
Ultramar.
I was just throwing it out there, but my point was that it's really funny to watch like old timey like Greek people being like, I grasp his cock in my hand,
and then they throw in like modern curse words.
Exactly.
I actually really don't like when they modernize shows.
Agree.
I would have much preferred the like extremely colorful expletives of the time period over.
Well, that's actually what it was interesting, because I just listened to a series on Billy the Kid that the last podcast on the left did, and they talked about Deadwood, and they talked about the fact that like Deadwood threw in cocksucker and motherfucker and all this shit, but like very realistically, colorful language during that time period would have been like, you rootin' tootin' highfalutin' mamma jamma, and that would have been
bellied, skin sucking, mosquito eating son of a bitch.
They wouldn't even have said bitch.
No, bitch has been around.
No, you're right. I think son of a bitch was one of the worst, and like that was one of the worst.
That was one of the worst ones. Because that was implying that your parents weren't married and that your mother is also like a whore and all kinds of other stuff. Because back in the day, the language was more like implying all these terrible things.
And that was using the insult.
Baseline.
And apparently, fuck, like the word fuck existed. It just wasn't
used
seen as a bad word.
Well, isn't it an acronym for like fornicating under the consent of the king or something like that?
I have no fucking clue.
Yeah.
Every time I see one of those things, I'm like, you just made this up.
It totally could be bullshit, but I did hear that at one point that it's an acronym, and it was supposed to differentiate the legal whorehouses from the illegal whorehouses because the legal ones pay taxes to the king.
Interesting.
Huh.
It could also be 100% bullshit because
I could also just be lying right on my ass.
Well, you know what?
Somebody lied out their ass to me and I ate it all up.
Well, like fanny to us, fanny is like a silly word for butt. Oh, you said fanny, ha ha ha, and we have fanny packs and everything. In Britain, they don't say fanny because fanny is slang for pussy. And they don't say fanny pack, they say bum bag because it's a bag you wear on your bum. And like that's apparently a big faux pas And I would just be like, that's a fanny pack. I don't
So if I called Tom a fanny, would he get mad?
I don't think Tom's keeps up with the British slang.
I don't think Tom has been British in a long enough period of time to get as mad about his British stuff as he does. Like my coworker moved out of England when she was like 5.
Yeah, Tom, let me tell you something.
Well, you met
real piece of work.
You know the coworker I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That gal.
Yeah.
She's also British.
Right.
She moved when she was 4 or 5. If you asked me to introduce her, so I would not be like, this is you old British friend. Like if I introduced Tom to somebody, I would not lead with British. I'd be like, this is beast.
Yeah.
There's nothing about Tom that screams British to me. I love you, Tom. There's nothing about you that screams British to me. It's cool that that's your history. It's cool that you connect to that. It's awesome as shit.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But like, I would not, I consider Tom an American.
He would disagree.
Would he?
I'm gonna speak for him right now.
Would he?
Probably.
Would he beat me? Would he? I'm gonna punch you in the throat right now,
He would beat
Ryan.
you with his cack.
All right. So entire worlds became twisted and bent to meet the darkest of sensations, and deep inside the webway, hidden in the chunks of hundreds of worlds, sprawling palaces of sadism, murder, avarice, hedonism, and vices of all other kinds began to take root. Important to note, the Drukhari, who are just Aeldari at this point, there is no definition yet, have already in this fall, as this is happening, have started to build hidden places deep in the webway.
Right. And if I remember right, is essentially that's what led to the construction of Gamora.
Gamora already at this point kind of already existed.
Right.
It just wasn't what it is now. It was much smaller.
It's evolved since then,
Yeah.
but this is essentially, these were the first buildings of Gamora.
Yes. Yeah. In the Immaterium, all of these intense experiences, dark desires, and misery were reflected and amplified. Although it was once mostly tranquil, the war in heaven had stirred things into existence, and the decline of the Aeldari only fueled these intelligences. Their lusts, dark desires, and the immense release of emotions started to coalesce. Fueled by their ever-dizzying heights of excess, a new god began to grow in the depths of the warp. Craftworlds, vast planetoid-sized spacecraft made from psychoactive wraithbone, had once been the core of the Aeldari trading across the Empire. Trading missions could take Craftworlds thousands of light years beyond the border of the Aeldari Empire. This created separate and distinct communities which were separated from the core worlds for Terran centuries at a time. Using the webway for travel and trading among the other intelligent races of the galaxies, this allowed a certain amount of perspective and created a strong and self-reliant culture of independence among those who lived and worked on these craft worlds. As a craft world might only revisit the core worlds every 300 to 400 years, it became incredibly easy for those who lived this life to perceive the continuing degradation of Aeldari society, even if it was impossible for the Eldar living on the core worlds to see it themselves. In the final weeks before the fall of the Aeldari people, many craft worlds had been called back to return to the heart of the Empire. Their home worlds were already torn apart in orgies of destruction, sadism, and decadence. As the birth of Slaanesh grew ever closer, Aeldari seers who had remained behind, existing in Aeldari culture without following to the corruption around them, had called for the aid of these craft worlds. The impending doom of the Eldar people was no longer a deniable factor. The craft worlds and these seers began a titanic effort to collect refugees from those Aeldari still sane and uncorrupted enough and start to evacuate them from these core worlds. As they did this, they also worked tirelessly to save cultural artifacts, museums, animals, even plants, and sometimes chunks of the planets themselves, anything that had been untouched or was untainted. Some were able to evacuate before the birth of Slaanesh. Others weren't so lucky. Many craft worlds were consumed at the moment of Slaanesh's birth. Others, further away, were just stripped completely of life. Some, even a little further away, were just pulled into and trapped around an orbit of the Eye of Terror that had begun to grow and were slowly consumed. Those that escaped early enough to drift throughout the galaxy, refugee populations connected loosely by the parts of the webway that remain active and stable.
So when Slaanesh went on, the fucking spree, what exactly happened? Like you say, like, oh, these Craftworlds were destroyed. Like, was it just a huge explosion? Was it warp fuckery?
It's
both.
Described.
I always think of it as both.
It's described as an explosion. There was like a psychic scream that ripped out. Think of a large explosion. Very realistically, you've got this. Let me put it this way. Think of that scene where the nuke goes off in
anything.
No, very specifically in Pacific Rim, where it goes off underwater.
Oh, yeah.
And there's that giant bubble of air that grows.
Right.
And it gets to a certain height, and like fucking fish are falling out and dying as they hit the ground. And then it just comes rushing back in. And when it comes rushing back in, it just destroys everything it touches. So there's an initial shockwave, and then there's an imploding shockwave.
Okay.
Very much the way that a nuke works on the surface world, but I didn't have a illustration
representation of it.
If that's what happens.
It's like we've all seen like submarine movies,
right?
The depth charge goes off,
yeah.
And at first it's boom, and everything gets like the submarine will rock one way, and then it gets pulled back the other direction.
Back the other way.
Essentially that.
Yeah.
And then also, if you want to take it even one step further, it's also happening in both. I would imagine the physical plane.
It's happening in both the material and the immaterium at the same time.
Being as psychically sensitive, imagine that
EMP.
Well, imagine like when an explosion goes off and you get that pressure wave in your ear, or like you're driving down the highway and you get that whoop 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 whoop.
Yeah.
Imagine that inside your head.
We'll have some better explanations of it that because now we're getting into the birth of Slaanesh right now, and like kind of some better details on what happened. However, I wanted to start the birth of Slaanesh with a quote from the Ordos Xenos. To the dark side of the Aeldari mind, all life is to be expended on a whim. Cruelty and generosity are but the impulse of a moment. Beauty and sensuality are virtues that can be expressed in bloodshed just as easily as in song. To an unfettered Aeldari mind, there is neither sanity nor madness, but merely a wave of perfect existence, fulfilled by its own savage monotone. Ralamine Mung from the Ordos Xenos.
I like it. It really goes out there to kind of express how alien, an Eldar mind would be to a human, to try to just understand.
So while cults dedicated to murder, sadism, torture, and death would slowly erode at the core of any society, the Aeldari people's heightened emotional and spiritual connection to the warp sent ripples of energy across the fabric of the Immaterium in staggering amounts. As they slipped into further vice, the negative energy only grew and began to feed back into their desires as well. So the more they engaged in vice, the more the fact that they're connected to the Immaterium made them want to be more debaucherous. It's a feedback loop.
Yeah, it's
essentially. The more you engage in it, the more you want to engage in it. This energy began to affect the entire galaxy. It created massive and terrible warp storms that came to define humanity's age of strife between M25 and M30. This is a time where interstellar travel and communication broke down across the entirety of the human civilization and colonies.
Which at this point was basically the height of human civilization.
This starts the beginning birth pangs of Slaanesh start the age of strife.
Right. Gotcha.
So we are now the end of Eldar society is essentially bookended between M25 and M30 roughly.
Gotcha. Now, the Age of Strife is after basically the golden age of humanity.
It's our golden age.
The golden age, the golden / dark age. Yeah.
It was the combination of AI rebelling against humanity.
Okay.
It was a bunch of stuff.
And going on a murder spree happened right about the same time.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So while we're dealing with, and there was some other things that happened as well. Humanity had treaties with certain alien races to like have trade and all that stuff.
Including the
Aeldari. But then when Slaanesh got born and the Men of Iron went rogue, humanity was like, hey, aliens like that are cool, like Aeldari, can we get some help? And the Aeldari were like,
the Aeldari were a little busy getting
They were busy. Obviously, they were busy. But all the other races that we had, at least the diplomacy with.
The big
were like,
thing, though.
In fact, we're going to attack you also.
The big thing, though, that completely completely caused the Age of Strife were very legitimately warp storms so bad that it cut Earth off from Mars.
Yeah, which is what created the Mechanicus.
Yeah.
Because the planet of Mars
didn't create the Mechanicus, but it fueled the divide.
And it essentially caused Mars to rely on their technology to even survive, which is why they began to worship
okay. So that warp storm basically forced Mars to be self-sufficient and become the Mechanicus.
It's also what caused the events on Earth or on Terra, which led to the Unification Wars. And so we're talking about we are linking events in Aeldari history now to events in human history
because they've started to overlap.
As we get into covering the Imperium, which we're going to start with the Imperial Guard, but the Imperium kind of as we end out this season of the podcast, we're going to get a lot into this side of ancient human history.
So we're just touching on it now.
We're touching on it
just to kind of establish that it does overlap.
Cross-reference.
That it's not like Aeldari history. This ends. Now it's human history that there is.
The history is one of those things where it overlaps. Looking at it as a solid singular plane doesn't
work. Looking at it as a timeline, it's not a timeline. It's like 10 timelines on top of each other.
It's also too much information to go chronologically with every race at the same time.
One of the things that I'm very much learning from, as the podcast evolves and we get a little bit better at writing the episodes and talking through our production meetings and all that, one of the things that I very much realized is like we're going to cover everything in the 40K timeline really quickly, and then we're going to dive back. Probably wasn't a good idea.
Right.
We probably should have.
It was lofty dreams, and
we probably should have just started with the faction overviews and then started linking stuff together.
Right. I think what we were trying to do was, because
it's just a lot of info.
It is
if you don't know that all of these factions exist in this one universe that is shared by everything, going this faction, and then that faction kind of loses some context.
Yeah.
So we wanted to kind of give everybody the big picture.
Yeah.
Then all the small pictures, and then we're going to put them all in one album for you, and we could go over it again kind of at the end, so that we don't have to break. This is what that word we just said means.
Which we have to do anyway.
We do anyways. But once we have kind of covered all the main factions.
Yeah, it becomes a lot easier to jump into little bits.
To reference it without all the stopping points of explanation.
And we also didn't want to be a listicle podcast. We didn't want to be like, here are 40 facts about the Imperium or here are 100 facts about the Orcs.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to start with the War in Heaven, super ancient history, or start in the Horus Heresy, where a lot of people start. We very much wanted to start with, this is the state of the universe now.
Well, yeah. And also, and even if you did start in the Horus Heresy, that doesn't explain how we got to the Horus Heresy.
Yeah, exactly.
Starting in the Horus Heresy,
it's really hard to pick a place.
Just starting in the Horus Heresy. That's all it is.
Yeah. I feel that we've gotten a little. The point is, I feel that we've gotten a little bit better as we've gone on, and I'm taking a couple seconds to apologize to you guys, our listeners, that we probably could have done 6 episodes on the entire timeline, not 3, and been possibly a little less confusing, but we're glad that you guys liked those, and we're glad that you guys stuck with us.
Yeah.
So a shadow of themselves now loomed over the Aeldari people, where once they had been pillars of nobility and pride, now they were defined by perversity and reckless abandon to any remaining shred of shame. The Aeldari worlds burned. Streets ran in rivers of blood as they murdered, laughed, and even consumed the corpses of their own dead, ever pushing the limits of their hedonism. Too late, the Eldar realized that they were creating a dark god as a reflection of their own image, a god who consumed the very core of the Aeldari people. 10,000 years ago, somewhere around M30, as the Age of Strife drew to a close, the Chaos God Slaanesh, she who thirsts, devourer of souls, doom of the Aeldari, burst into divine existence and consciousness. At this moment, no matter how far removed they had become, or how much physical distance that they had put between themselves and the homeworlds, how many protections that they had wrapped around their societies, every Aeldari alive felt her claws deep in their soul. Slaanesh's birth tore across the universe. At the very core of the Aeldari Empire, the psychic scream of her birth ripped the souls from the bodies of all Aeldari within 1,000 light years. So that's your answer. In that instant, that bubble expanded to 1,000 light years and ripped the souls from their bodies. So they all instantaneously died, and their souls were all instantaneously consumed.
That's gnarly.
Only the Exodites, separated by immense distances, those protected by the Wraithbone of the Craftworlds, as in they were actually inside the Wraithbone. They were shielded
since
by it.
It's psychoactive. It's kind of like a Faraday cage for it. Yep. That's cool.
And those who had fled into the subrealms of the Webway survived. Billions of Aeldari screamed aloud and fell as lifeless husks in a heartbeat after the birth, their souls sucked back into She Who Thirsts, to then be slowly consumed in the depths of agony that they had helped foster for 1,000 years. So think of like a black hole. You get to a certain point on the event horizon of a black hole and you're fucking dead. But because of the way that a black hole works, your death is immensely stretched because of how time works.
Because time...
So you're dead in an instant. However...
To you, it's not.
To you, it could be thousands of years of agony. It's a very weird concept because of the way that we view time.
Yeah.
Which is very limited by our abilities to perceive
time is
the
different
universe.
once you enter a black hole kind of thing.
Yep.
Okay.
In the afterbirth of her ascendance, the heart of the Aeldari Empire became a wound of pure chaos that had been torn into the material universe. Although separated by other means, the Exodites, Craftworlds, and Drukhari were all marked for the rest of their existence as a doomed people. Their nemesis was born, and she would hunt them for the rest of eternity. Countless worlds and a region of space once known for its paradises and opulence was now a ravaged wound, the very fabric of reality torn open. This gets to your statement about their melding.
Mm-hmm.
Although Slaanesh's focus had been the Aeldari people, countless orcs, humans, and any other species caught in this psychic shockwave had also been obliterated and consumed. As the ripples and aftershocks continued, psychers of all species howled in pain as countless numbers of them died in storms of blood and rampages of homicidal maniacs. So her being born caused all sorts of shit. Like, psychers literally drowning in rainstorms made of blood. Other psychers just going on killing sprees and murdering a bunch of people. It's some of this stuff, in fact, which turned the crusade, the pre-crusade mindset between psychers might have a use to psychers are super goddamn dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Slowly, this growing and pulsating wound would spread to encompass the entire area of the Aeldari core realms of old, settling into the massive warpstone now known as the Eye of Terror. Within the Eye of Terror's borders, demons and demon princes have free reign. The forces of chaos rule over entire worlds, and these once beautiful paradises are now twisted demonic reflections of the Aeldari paradises they once were. So every single planet, Aeldari paradise world, is now some sort of fucked up demon world. After the expense of this amount of energy, the warp storms around the galaxy began to settle, and the Age of Strife officially came to an end. Slaanesh joined the ranks of the Chaos Gods, and the storms that had specifically locked Terra and Mars apart dispersed. This allowed the Emperor of Mankind to begin upon the Great Crusade. So to recap, sometime, most likely millennia before even M1, the Aeldari inherited the galaxy from the Old Ones. At some point after that, let's just say M2 to M5, the Exodites saw the writing on the wall and dipped. Then around M25 to M30, shit got real bad, and the Craftworlds were called back to help in the exodus of Eldar that were considered redeemable. However, also around this time, the Drukhari, who were basically just the Eldari at their darkest place in this entire timeline, started to build palaces and complexes deep in the Wemway. This became the core foundation of the city of Camorra. Then around M29 or M30, everything came to a fever pitch and Slaanesh was born, leaving the wound that is now called the Eye of Terror as a gateway between the now extremely violent and turbulent Immaterium and the warp of the material galaxy.
The birth of Slaanesh didn't... The eye was always there, right?
No.
So the eye became
the eye of
thing when Slaanesh was born?
Yes. So Slaanesh was born in the center of the Eldari core worlds. And that
their version
1,000, yeah. So their version of the center of the Terran Empire. So if you were to draw a 1,000 light year radius
blast
around,
template,
yeah,
and put it on the map.
Yep.
That on the galaxy.
That is now the Eye of Terror. So before M30, the Eye of Terror didn't exist. The Maelstrom existed. The Eye of Terror did not.
And the Maelstrom was just like the thinning of the material plane and the Immaterium?
The Maelstrom is essentially the singularity at the center of the Milky Way galaxy.
Oh, okay.
The Maelstrom is the anchor point between the Materium and the Immaterium in the Milky Way.
Gotcha. And that became the Eye of Terror. No, that is different than the
It's different.
They are two different points.
Okay.
And I had forgotten, but the Maelstrom is what they call the giant magic well in the center of Fantasy World.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
The big high, high elves have basically
a giant. It's a whirlpool.
It's a giant whirlpool that sucks the winds of magic into and then basically drains it.
And for any of those of you who play World of Warcraft, it's suspiciously similar to the, what is it called? Is it called the Maelstrom in there too?
Yeah.
Anyway,
imagine that.
So basically, the way that we understand gravity now in real world terms is there's a giant black hole or mass of black holes. There's a giant mass,
a gravitational
well at the middle of the Milky Way galaxy, which is what the Milky Way galaxy orbits around. Right. In the 40k universe, that is a hole between the physical realm and the Immaterium, which kind of weirdly matches up with some of the way that we're starting to look at matter and dark matter and like quantum mechanics.
Okay, I think you explained this to me before. Like you're saying, like the Eye of Terror is like an asshole, and the Maelstrom would be like the belly button.
Yes, we did explain it that way because
I honestly don't remember that.
You might not have been here.
I might not have been here.
No, Mark is very big on booty holes, so we had.
I know.
We put it in booty hole terms.
Yeah. But I remembered.
That's true. So technically the Eye of Terror, the Eye of Terror didn't exist until M30.
Gotcha. Okay. Man, you guys fucked it. All this shit.
Literally the whole galaxy being in a shit show is their fault.
Yeah.
No wonder the fucking Inquisition is like kill the alien because they know.
Then around M29, I think we covered this. This was also the birth of Slaanesh that basically coincides with the start of the Imperium of Man. So the birth of Slaanesh allowed the beginning of the Imperium of Man. We'll be coming back to this timeline when we cover the Unification Wars, the birth of the Imperium, and then the Horus Heresy. But it's pretty good to just lay this all out quickly so you guys understand where everything works as far as how it coincides with the lore and timeline. So the last little bit that we're going to cover today before we bid you guys farewell until next episode is the decline of the Eldari people. So in birthing Slaanesh, the Eldari created their greatest enemy, who they refer to as She Who Thirsts. No longer can their souls return to the respite of the Imperium, rest, and then be reborn into another body. For the Slaanesh desires nothing more to eat but souls, and her favorite are Eldari souls. It's said that she will not rest until she has consumed the entire race.
So something that was kind of tickling my brain.
Mm-hmm.
The Aeldari that were not involved, the Exodites, who dipped out before essentially everything hit Japan, their souls are also technically still siphoned by Slaanesh.
Yeah.
They weren't really involved.
I think it's kind of like how some people really like yellowfin tuna, and it doesn't really matter if that yellowfin tuna comes from this region of the ocean or that region way the fuck over there.
Yeah.
It's still tasty ass yellowfin tuna.
So if you don't make it into the Tree of Might, Slaanesh drinks your soul out of your booty.
Yeah.
If you don't connect with one of what? The Tree of Might?
Even though the World Tree.
The World Tree,
They weren't involved in any way. They're still just by nature of being Aeldari.
Yeah.
Is it called the World Tree?
World Spirit.
World Spirit, okay.
But yeah, World Tree works too.
World Spirit.
That was Avatar, right? World Tree?
Yes.
Whatever the fuck is it. Yeah. I was saying Tree of Might is Dragon Ball. See?
But yeah, essentially
trees and spirits and fuckery.
Just like with the wow, I had a thing there. Well, fuck me.
Slaanesh probably would.
Probably.
Definitely.
Do you think Slaanesh has ever said no?
No. I would go against.
I know.
Literally go against
the opposite of Slaanesh. Slaanesh is yes. Yes, please.
Yes, and.
Yes, and.
Yes, and.
So
yes,
and. Asking Ryan, you want a drink?
Yes, and. So basically, yeah, the way to look at it is that's the thing. Oh, I know what I was going to make the comparison to. So the Catachan or the Satan, however you want to pronounce it, they subsisted for years off of essentially eating the radiation output of stars.
Right.
And then they met the Necron tier, and the Necron tier taught the Satan that suffering souls tasted better than stars. And the Satan were like, oh yeah, we're not going back. That's kind of what the very analogous to the Slaanesh thing. Yeah. Slaanesh was like, souls taste pretty good. But you know what? Them cherry tasting Aeldari souls are the tastiest.
So whether
I'm gonna eat them all.
Yeah. Whether or not the
Eldar souls are the quenchiest.
Eldars were even,
the quenchiest.
were even involved.
Yeah. But I think part of it too is that, Slaanesh's power, the base of her power comes from Eldari psychic energy. So think of it like that movie, The One with Jet Li. Where he starts killing all of the versions of himself.
That movie
could also be
trip.
Yeah, it could also be that's what Slaanesh is doing. Slaanesh very much realizes that every Eldari soul she kills makes her stronger.
Okay, that works.
So maybe consuming all of them is a path to beating out to her becoming other three brothers and becoming
ultimate
the best.
You might say Slansayan.
So those that were lost out in the darkness of space, that survived, rode out the destruction on Craftworlds, still cling to the remains of the culture that was at the core of the fallen Aeldari Empire. Now, this would be the ancient culture. This would be the non-decadent parts of the culture. They consider themselves to be the true children of Asurion, who is the Phoenix King of the Aeldari Pantheon. It's one of their gods. And that's one of the reasons that they've named themselves the Asuriani. So they live out life on their continent-sized vessels that are essentially the last fragments of the dying race that endlessly sail deep throughout the Sea of Stars. They're always seeking to stay just a step ahead of She Who Thirsts, and they primarily achieve this through the use of soul stones or spirit stones and the path system. A spirit stone or a soul stone is also used by the Exodites. These essentially trap or capture. They're think of it like the ghost trap in Ghostbusters. At the moment of death, it collects or traps your soul, and then your soul can be transferred into the infinity circuit or the world spirit.
I was thinking like Shang Tsung, Mortal Kombat.
Your soul is mine.
I was actually thinking a little more current. The Elder Scrolls series has has literally a spell called Soul Trap. And an item called Soul Gem.
And what you're doing is they're even called soul gems.
What you do is you have an empty soul gem. You cast Soul Trap on something, and if you kill it, that soul goes into the gem, which you can then use to either enchant weapons and armor or repower depleted enchantments.
And that's really weird because very, very, very similar to the way that spirit stones and soul stones work.
There's
especially considering you can put a soul stone into a wraith construct and get a warrior.
Yeah. And there's actually a lot of good parallels between the Elder Scrolls universe and like the way, because like even the realm of Oblivion is very much like the realm of Chaos.
Yeah.
Now those wraith constructs is the soul stone that you put in that wraith, is it like dreadnought status where it's like that soul is controlling that wraith, or is it like a battery controlling like an AI type thing?
I'd say it's almost both.
Yeah, it's a little weird. We'll get into it next episode when we break into these are the different craft worlds and this is how they use stuff. But I think so the Infinity Circuit is essentially like, you know, if the cool parts of the Matrix are walking around downtown New York, bippeting and boppeting, that's the warp before the coming of chaos. And the Infinity Circuit is like the white base layer of the Matrix. So there's this weird like twilight of nothing that all of these souls exist in.
Like a purgatory?
Yeah. It's not a bad place, but it's not really described as like a good place.
Neutral ground of
it just is.
Don't get eaten by
Slaanesh. You're not getting eaten by Slaanesh.
You're not getting eaten.
And in theory, when they call upon to answer you really briefly, and in theory, when they call upon a wraith construct to fight for them, they're like, "Hey, Bob, we want you to come help us." And Bob goes, "All right, cool." However, because of the way that the Infinity Circuit works with, it's a little more likely that what you're getting out is a little bit of Rita in my life, a little bit of Janet by my side. You're not getting Bob. You're getting whatever bits of soul were close enough when you pulled it out, if that makes any sense. Yeah, that was my horrible attempt at doing Mambo
I get
number
what
5.
you're saying. Yeah. I get what you're saying, and that's kind of why I was saying it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Like, you're getting Bob, but you're also getting all the kind of like the whatever was touching Bob.
Yeah.
So you're a battery, but you're also like a multi conscious thing that,
which is why
it's also not really well defined.
It isn't very well defined, but they kind of view wraith constructs as like a form of necromancy.
Yeah.
And that's why
wraith constructs are not. Yeah, it very much is. It
isn't necromancy, but it's viewed in a very similar way as necromancy because essentially you're taking a dead person's soul and binding it into
a living thing,
what becomes a
mechanical
living
thing
after you bind the soul to it.
They use wraith constructs because they have to, because their race is dying, not because they want to.
And they still have babies?
Yeah. They still reproduce. But they and we'll get to that here in a second because we're going to talk about their reactions to humanity. That's the very last part we're going to talk about. But just to wrap up, just so we can cover the other groups, the Exodites follow a very similar set of rules as the Craftworlds do. In fact, the Craftworld technology of the Infinity Circuit is based on the Exodite technology, which made the World Tree. It's very, very similar. Soul Stones, Return to the World Tree, the World Spirit. It's similar to, but the Exodite World Spirit or World Tree is often considered a little bit nicer. There's a little bit more cush in their purgatory. However, since a craft world can move, or the warriors can leave the craft world and dip the whole thing into the web way or hide it or whatever, it's really hard to hide an entire planet. So the Exodites very, very much will live and fight to the savage, bitter end to protect their planets.
Well, yeah.
Because and some of it is because they're trying to protect the world spirit, but they're also incredibly isolationist. Mm-hmm. So one of those things Amish. That could very much, which can very, there's a TV show called Amish Mafia, which is actually kind of creepy because it gets into some of the stuff that they do. And Yeah, dude. The further you're removed from like actual violence, the levels of ultra violence you're willing to like accept as normal are weird. Anyway, that's one of the things that very easily could have happened. You know, a human colony before the Age of Strife traded with Aeldari and has it in their records, and then the warp storms abate, and then the humans are like, oh, cool, well, there's some of these cool dudes like next door, let's go visit them. And they land, and the fucking Exodites just murder all of them because the Exodites are like, do not come near us.
Yeah.
They may have even warned them like 10 times, don't come here. We want nothing to do with you. We need to be left alone because it's our way of life. And then the Exodites just fucking murder them. And then the humans are like, okay, all things that look like that are bad.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that happened to make the Aeldari people
look bad in the eyes of humans, and to give them a reason to also be mad at everybody else.
Yep. So hidden deep within the webway in a city or realm or city realm that spans a ridiculous amount of space are the Drukhari, who live in the dark city of Kamara. They have basically survived by the psychic protections that were embedded by the old ones to keep the few entities that did exist in the warp from getting into the webway. So something very important to understand about the warp before modern era, back in the old one's time, essentially, is that the warp was like the majority of the deep ocean. Generally speaking, if you're in the middle of the deep ocean, it's like being in a desert.
There's just nothing there.
It's empty. It's tranquil. There's nothing there. But every fucking once in a while,
some big
a white tip comes by. And white tip sharks are incredibly violent and vicious and dangerous. Same thing with the warp. When the old ones built the webway, they built the webway to protect from those random chance encounters with something nasty that did live in the warp. However, now in
there's a lot
40K,
more nasties in the warp.
The fucking Imperium is teeming with nasties, and they swarm at any incursion into their realm. As to where before it would be like, if I chance upon it, I chance upon it. Now it's like a beacon. As soon as it happens, they're all there.
Right, because basically anything with a psychic presence shows up like a candle in the darkness.
Yeah. And basically, the more things that die, the more things exist in the warp. If you want to look at it as an analogy, every time something dies, its soul ends up in the warp, and who knows how twisted or corrupted it is. And we don't really have a baseline for that. You know, humans are like, oh, well, if you're a psyker and you die, you're going to be torn apart slowly in the warp. And we have this entire story of like, when Aeldari die, Slaanesh slowly rips their souls apart and sucks them dry. But what we know about the warp is that energy isn't, just like conservation of energy in the material realm, energy isn't really ever destroyed. It's just like repurposed. So maybe Slaanesh sucking their souls just makes these fucking horrible predators that exist in the warp that become demonettes. We don't know. We don't really have the answer, and it's written that way on purpose. So yeah, these are known as the Drukhari. Even deeper into the webway, hidden in even more special and secret places, are the followers of the Aeldari deity one of the few Aeldari deities who escaped, Kegarak, the laughing god. These are the Harlequins, and they are welcomed in every surviving Aeldari community, as we mentioned. They are basically the keepers and the remembrancers of the Aeldari people and the hope for the future of the Aeldari people. Most of Aeldari culture, and I believe you kind of asked this at the beginning, Mark, so I wanted to circle back to it. A lot of the way that they deal with like calendars and times and everything is that they tell their history through myth and through very, very artistic expression.
Okay.
So they don't really rely on calendar like dates and timelines the way that humans do. A lot of it's allegory and story.
Gotcha.
It does tell a very accurate depiction of their history, but it's just not told the way
it's accurate, but it's also vague.
Right.
Because to them, it's more the events that mattered, less the time, because time was so perceived differently.
So just to kind of wrap up, I wanted to touch upon a couple of things that the Aeldari people now view as a problem, and how they kind of exist in M42, whatever year it is now. So the Aeldari are very much watching the Imperium of Man, because just as the old ones went away and the Aeldari inherited the galaxy from them, the Aeldari kind of are in decline and falling and becoming a dying and dead people. And the Imperium of Man is ascending to take their place. The majority of the reason that this is happening, Mark, and you asked this question earlier, is that an Aeldari takes about 100 years to get to a mature status. So we can assume that that probably means it takes about 100 years before you're sexually capable of reproducing. At that point,
generally in biology, that's what defines mature.
Yeah.
It isn't personality, it's ability to reproduce.
Gotcha. Right.
So
their mature state,
so long, they can't reproduce for, at least 100 years.
So in 100 years, and the time it takes an Aeldari to get to a mature state to reproduce, several generations of humans can be born. And with the way that human technology exists in the Imperium, all of those generations might still be alive to fight at almost peak physical condition at the same time. The way that the Eldar view humans reproducing is the same way that we view rats or vermin as reproducing. They see it at
excessive numbers.
Right, excessive numbers. There's way many more humans than there are Aeldari. And because the humans are so violent, they're a problem. Because every Aeldari who's killed could take 1,000 years to regain that person, as to where, every
years, 18 years,
billion, every
humans
billion
are like
human deaths.
Guard.
Yeah.
Literally every billion human deaths, the Imperium as a whole kind of shrugs.
A tenth of the time and 10 times as many.
The other major problem. There's another two major problems. The other major problem, or one of the other major problems that the Aeldari see, is that as the human Imperium continues, it's getting closer and closer to what the Aeldari are like, oh no, we did that. We've been here. You are getting closer and closer to the decline. And the Aeldari are scared of what that means for the future of the warp.
Are the humans, everything.
Yeah. Are the humans going to birth something even worse? And is that even worse thing going to consume the entire galaxy?
Right.
Is Big E ascending into godhood, into demonhood?
And could that either be a bad thing or a good thing?
Already happening? Well, the Eldar don't think it's going to be a good thing.
Well, yeah.
The Eldar are like another deity being born is bad.
Yeah. Whereas the humans, it could be a good thing.
Because, I would say that there are human factions right now that believe that embracing the dark chaos gods are a good thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah.
There's like 10 out of 20 legions.
Man, fuck those guys.
The other thing, or another thing, is the greenskins, the orcs, and the Asuryani have had a lot of crossover in the past. And the way that the way that the Aeldari people dealt with the orcs largely was they were either fighting with them, like side by side with them, or they kind of had like a contain and protect mindset to orc worlds. They would kind of contain the spread of orcs. They'd be like, all right,
okay, yeah,
this is your planet. Y'all are feral. You're all fighting each other. We're just not going to go there.
So 40K,
and especially if you roll it back to allegedly the Quark and the
they fought alongside the Quark.
Right,
but when the orcs started to
the old ones,
right.
So essentially, by both knowing that they were essentially the product of the need of the old ones to fight the Necrontyr, that they would at least have a neutrality almost agreement.
But not an agreement. The Aeldari understand that orc, and I think this is what Marky was about ready to get to, that orc physiology was literally designed so that if you kill them,
it doesn't
more come back.
Yeah.
So if one orc dies, 10 orcs are going to spring up 10 years later in its place.
If you don't fire it all down.
Right.
Yeah.
So the Aeldari understand this, and their method of dealing with the orcs has always been to contain them. They can't contain them anymore because their empire is shattered and gone.
And
the way that the humans deal with orcs is to fight them,
right?
Which only makes orcs stronger. And in fact, Asuryani seers believe that the orc tide has already reached critical mass and that there is almost nothing that can be done about the orcs eventually consuming the entire galaxy.
Yeah, what I was going to say was...
That's the Great Wa, right?
They call it the Greenskin Tide, but...
Right, but that's like the Great Wa that Ghazghkull is trying to bring about, right?
Yeah, in a sense. What I was going to bring up was... in 40k conspiracy theories, is that Ghazghkull, when he was shot in the dome, that he actually did die, and now he's just a puppet for the Eldar for them to direct or give direction to the orcs. So instead of containing them, their Eldar are actually just pointing them in different directions.
Yeah, they're pointing them specifically at Chaos.
The Tyranids and at Chaos.
Right.
Chaos,
because out of all the things in the galaxy, those are the biggest threats.
Right.
Humans are after all that.
So he's not actually listening to Gork and Mork. He's actually listening to like Eldar.
And it's a specific, I think in that theory, it's a specific seer.
Right. Eldrad or some shit. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
the Eldar god of death, that could make sense. I could see.
Yeah. So basically that he's not hearing Gork and Mork, he's hearing some kind of Eldar that's pointing him in another direction that's not going to wipe out the Eldar.
Yeah. Well, the Eldar,
fair enough.
As far as the Asuryani are concerned, the orcs are going to kill everything eventually, because the humans have fought them too much. So as far as the Craftworlds are considered,
it's already
over. Humans fucked up and it's already over. Whether or not they're trying to save, we don't know. And whether or not that's true, who knows? And that could be at some Asuryani. So yeah, it's interesting. I think we're gonna. So we noticed in doing this series that we left out a little bit of like orc backstory and orc history. We are going to go back and do some orcstory episodes for you guys.
Yeah, we just wanted to touch on it.
Yeah. So in more recent millennia, there has been the foremost concern, which is the invasion of the Tyranids. And that's mostly because the Exodites, not the Exodites, the Tyranids thirst, obviously, for biomass. Craftworlds and Exodite planets are ripe with the best types of biomass for the hive mind. The other thing is that the Eldar don't know where the Tyranids came from. This is something where the Eldar are like, we don't fucking know.
Yeah, we've been around since day one, and I don't know when that guy showed up to the party.
Yep.
Invited this guy.
The Tau kind of just bug them, and they see them as this ignorant upstart race that is bumbling around the universe, running into tomb worlds and waking up the Necrons. Obviously, the Eldar and the Necrons don't get along because the Eldar were created to fight the Necron tier.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, all other threats aside, we have the coming of the Great Rift, called the Dathan Dane by the Aeldari. That is the Cicatrix Maledictum, which split the galaxy in two. So, however, maybe not everything is the apocalyptic ride to slaughter, and there might be a way the Aeldari people can get out, and that is the newest Aeldari deity, Ynid, who has become manifest in these end times. While many have pledged themselves to the god of the dead, others question whether or not the newborn Ynnari faction or the so-called reborn are actually good or what they're actually following. However, Ynid and Ynid's forces do offer a different way for the Aeldari to fight their inevitable march towards death and obscurity. So that's going to wrap us up for today, unless you guys have anything to add.
Yeah. No, I feel like that's a pretty good place to end up.
To wrap it all up. So we'll be back with a part 3 where we'll specifically talk about the Eldar Craftworlds.
More like the present day state of the union.
Yeah, because there are several, just like we did with orcs, there are several different types of Craftworlds and they all kind of work in a different way. We'll also touch on the Drukhari and the 3 different ways that you can play the Drukhari and we will touch on the major way that you can play the new faction, which is the Ynnari, who follow Ynid. There's not really a lot of ways to play Exodites right now. However, when we do get to my episode, my brainstorming episode, we'll talk about my Exodite lore and building my Exodite lore. We will get into how the Exodites are played on tabletop. And obviously, if you guys watch us on Twitch, you've had an opportunity to watch me play my Exodites already.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
I'm actually, I really hope you guys get an official rule set for Exodites.
I hope it's coming this year.
It's like one of those things that it really should have been around already.
Oh, yeah. They're huge in lore.
Well, yeah.
I think the way that G-Dub kind of like skirts around it, though, is that they've always been they're isolationists. They don't like getting involved in galactic politics. I think the big change is Ynnari.
And Custodes are the Emperor's personal guard. Yeah. What's your point?
Yeah. Well, one's a human faction, and our community has asked us a couple of times where we are with our hobby progress, and we're trying to update you guys. We did get some great lore-based questions too from our community, and we're planning on bringing that up in a future episode. But Noir, we did hear you. Great freaking question, and we are planning some content to address that. But yeah, guys, let's just lay out our hobby progress quickly. Where's everybody at? I mean, you guys obviously, if you watched our stream, have seen what we did tonight or what we did 5 days ago, where I was working on my Black Legion. Marky was working on his Lord of Skulls.
Lord of Skulls, yeah.
And you,
I did
Kev's
a whole bunch
been
of
working
stuff.
on. Yeah, Kev was just beating down the doors.
I banged out a bunch of Scion painting, and then I went on and did some touch up on Ikbart's Curse of the Basilisk there that needed to go back and have some detail work done back on that guy.
Polish it up here.
And then I busted out one of my lumberjack.
Oh, that's right. Your lumberjack Scion.
Or my lumberjack armigers.
I did. Oh, okay. Got you. I was thinking of the color scheme you're using for your Scions.
Right,
I'm like, lumberjack.
I really thought it would be funny to paint one of them plaid and like just paint.
That's
like
pretty funny, man.
Paint Paul Bunyan and like have Mark like take his little tiny and just call it Paul Bunyan.
I actually have I'm still waiting on it, but I did a Kickstarter that has placards, so you can
cool.
Like, names.
That's
actually
badass.
The thing is though is that they've only released 40 mil right now. They haven't released 25, 32 or anything bigger. And 32, 40, and 25 are the ones that we need to do like crusade stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of like,
so soon TM?
Soon.dm.
So where are you as far as hobby progress stuff goes?
I need to work. I did work on that Lord of Skulls. I need to work on a beast boss on Squigosaur. I need to work on.
What would you do this week or the last 2 weeks? I guess that's the
absolutely
more
nothing. Yeah.
Oh, you're in a drought.
Good. Yeah. Well, trying to hang out with the wife a little more.
Okay,
past couple weeks.
Family time.
Like it.
Family time matters.
Okay.
I spent like 5 days straight playing and hobbying, and she's like, "We need more time."
Yeah, you're like, wrap it up, boy. Wrap it up.
Yeah.
Get back to it. Yeah. So you got some plans coming up then, huh? So you should have some stuff for us next time.
Hopefully.
Cool.
Hopefully.
So I dug out all of the Warhammer stuff and combined my NIDs with my new NIDs and started doing some painting on that too. So you guys have probably seen a couple of pictures of my Swarm Lord as I nail down the new or the refreshed paint scheme that I'm going to go with. My current plan is to have my paint schemes close enough to each other that they can play in the same army. But as I move forward over the next several months of the hobby, I'll just start stripping one unit at a time. As I need a break from working on Aeldari, I'll strip one unit at a time and bring them up to snuff. I'm still working on my Aeldari, my Exodites. I just took a little bit of a break to try to get my Tyranids to a really nice tabletop level.
Surprise Tyranids.
Surprise Tyranids.
I did do hobby stuff.
What'd you do?
I put together my aberrants, and I think I showed you.
Yeah, I saw pictures.
The alien tails and
the heads.
Yeah, the heads and
that's cool.
Yeah.
You gonna paint them boys up?
Yeah, I need to.
Cool. Are they gonna be on table when we play our last game?
Probably not.
So our last game, will be on Twitch. We'll announce whether or not it's happening this upcoming Friday or the Friday after. So watch our Discord to figure out what we're doing on Twitch. Yeah, guys, anything else to add hobby-wise?
No, that's about it, man.
No, that's about it. I'm looking forward to finishing my other Armiger, but
yeah, we'll see soon. I have a feeling.
Yeah, hopefully. And then I'll actually have to get around to building the real knight.
Yeah, the big knight.
Yeah.
I saw you brought him today.
Yeah, I brought it. I thought about busting it out, but that's a lot of sprue to clip.
Oh my God, man, that's a lot of stuff to do. That wraps it up for part 2 of the Aeldari. Did we leave something out of our history and lore episodes so far? Is there something that you find super compelling in ancient Aeldari history that we glossed over? Or do you just have some of your own Aeldari lore you want to share with us? You can reach out to us through our email at grimdarkgaming@gmail.com or underthehiveofmadness@gmail.com. We have a growing community on Discord. You guys freaking rock, and we love every single one of you. But if this is the first episode you have tuned into or the first time you've ever heard of Discord, you should head over and join our growing community. We have several different things going on over there, such as a painting contest. It's also one of the best ways to get in contact with us. You can play some games with us. You can pick our brains about lore. You can talk to us about Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons, video games in general. Yep.
Movies. You name it. We talk all kinds of shit.
We talk also, yeah, we do.
Between the 4 of us, at least one of us will have played, watched, read, or
done it,
touched whatever it is you're talking about.
We also have a community writing project over there called the Hive Project. So if you're wondering about the little tidbits that you get at the beginning and the end of our episode, those come out of the Hive Project. We are writing lore for the Innsmouth Hive. That is the hive that 665.66 UHMR Chemrat Radio broadcasts out of.
Community lore.
We were actually working on the origins of the four-armed emperors and what they are earlier today. So we're planning on dropping some knowledge here in the coming future. You can also join us Friday nights somewhere between 5:30 and 6:30 Pacific Standard Time on our Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/GrimDarkGaming. We usually do either hobby related streams, like tonight we did a hobby stream, or we do battle reports. We do have some plans in the future for some role-playing games and some other content. When we do hobby games, we like to do Ask Us About a Topic, and then we just kind of chill out, relax, and hang with you guys. We get some synthwave tunes bopping out, and then we just kind of talk about stuff. It's kind of a little bonus podcast episode in a way that only those of you who've logged in at that particular moment in time get to witness. Next week is a little bit of a treat for you guys, or possibly as a bonus episode at some point in the next week for you guys is a better way to say that. We did an interview with a guest host that we had a couple of weeks ago, Nerd of Many Faces, about his podcast, Knights of Nerd. For those of you who have a chance, you can check out the episode of Knights of Nerd that I guested on. As always, we generally leave all of the links on the ways to find us down in our show notes, and we will do the same with a link to the Knights of Nerd podcast episode. Lastly, or maybe not lastly, but just to sort of wrap it up, if you guys want to touch our lives and help us out a little more directly, you can hit us up at patreon.com/underthehiveofmadness. The money that we raise through Patreon and Twitch very much goes into improving the studio and improving the equipment that we use to produce the podcast for you guys. We are definitely growing. We are definitely learning. We are learning on our format. We are learning on how to use technology. And we're learning what mistakes we can make with that technology. So every little bit definitely does help. You can also like us on your podcast app of choice. We personally all prefer Spotify. That helps us stick out in the various algorithms, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Pocket Casts, any of those other ones that you guys use. Find us anywhere else on the internet is to use our link tree, which is linktree/underthehive. We are also still working on our website. There's just a lot going on in personal lives that are kind of wrapping up the ability to sit down and really bang out a design or make custom code for a website. We did purchase it though. Underthehiveofmadness.com is owned by us. And there is a skeleton, But for now, our link tree is the best way to find us on our various social media platforms. We're running low on ammo, but running even higher on these new reptile leathers. It's time for us to pack it up before we have to switch over to using foul language.
Take that, you sons of bitches.
Get some!
Join us next week for the grand opening of Beast's barely braised baby back gator ribs.
I heard that dry rub is to die for.
I don't even want to know what that means. But you know what? It's a dry and it's a rub, so I'm all in, baby.
Doesn't sound like it feels very good.
I've heard it costs extra.
I figured it was spices, but...
Oh.
Y'all foul motherfuckers.
This is why it costs extra. Spices are expensive.
I see. It's my dirty mind. You just made it my fault.
No wonder Slaanesh.
You just made it my fault.
It was your fault to begin with.
Just because I have purple and my pink in my mohawk does not mean that I am a fan of he, she, who, whatever's.
He, she, who thirst fucks.
Yeah. She
peas in your mouth.
You're really stuck on that, man. That is not how that...
It got me.
The farther into tomorrow we get, the worse.
The weirder it's pineapple time is here. We have been your guides on today's safari excursion, and we would like to thank you for riding the friendly and insane Voxwave channels with 665.66 UHMR Chemrat Radio. We will catch you guys next time. I'd say same bat place, but we move a lot, so just same rat channel.
Peace. Later.